There's nothing quite like 428 Shibuya Scramble. It's been a long time since I first learned about the game, 4 years in fact, but I've always been eager to get my hands on it, my excitement never dwindling. From the 40 out of 40 score in Famitsu, to the insane budget and quirky visuals that this game has to offer, there's something that's excited me and intrigued me about 428 for years. And now, it's finally out in the West thanks to some miracle by Spike Chunsoft. After waiting for so long, I'm sure you're wondering if it was worth the wait for me, and I'm sure you're wondering if it's worth picking up for you. My answer to both of these questions is a definitive yes. 428 is one of my favorite visual novels I played in years, and my favorite game of 2018 thus far. Welcome to RockmanDash Reviews, and here are my thoughts on the visual novel 428 Shibuya Scramble. Before we start talking about the story, let's get the thing you're probably thinking about out of the way. 428 looks nothing like any other visual novel you've probably seen thanks to its photographic presentation of live actors, and frankly, that's a good thing. The amount of budget and effort that went to this game's presentation is frankly amazing, and while it might seem like an acquired taste, the amount of charm and effort that they put into this game's visuals make me think that very few people would actually dislike it. 428 is a game that tries to balance weird and serious, and its presentation goes a long way to making this work. If you ask me, the presentation is fantastic and really adds a lot of character. It's a visual style that echoes its era in a way that ages extremely well, much better than others in its time, and makes me think that this game will be looked back at as a timeless classic, one that will stand out throughout the ages. As for the sound of 428, it echoes many of the same elements from the visuals like charm and personality, and it definitely serves as the emotional driving point of the diverse story, but this one's more of an acquired taste. It has a lot of character, and it has some songs that just help make the moment feel absolutely fantastic, but some of the songs are just plain weird and many just fall flat. It's a serviceable soundtrack, and it definitely lives up to the name of sound novel driving the story, but it's not something you're going to want to listen to outside of the game. Trust me, I've tried. It's overwhelmingly mediocre, and it's just not very listenable. Now with the presentation in general out of the way, on to the story. 428 is a slice of life police procedural story. From 10 AM to 6 PM on the titular April 28th in the titular Shibuya, 428 revolves the kidnapping of Maria Osawa, a girl with fascinating relationships. At first glance, the story goes through these events fairly straightforward, but as the player progresses through the story, the scope of 428 evolves into something grander, with elements like gangs, viruses, international syndicates, which start to play a role and make for a fascinating tale. If you like both an entertaining slice of life or a very compelling police procedural drama, you are going to get it here, and that's fantastic. But assuming that's all 428 is doing the work a severe disservice. This starts at the fact that the entire cast in general is pretty likable and entertaining thanks to 428's personal and quirky writing. All have endearing faults, all have relatively straightforward problems and beliefs. All are human and enjoyable. I got to love all of them. Kano, the idealistic yet rookie detective, Achi, the former gang member clean freak, Minorikawa, the over-the-top freelance journalist, Tama, the poor girl stuck in a catsuit, and Kenji Osawa, the viralist dealing with family issues in the kidnapping of his daughter. I thought all of them were great, and I got basically attached to all of the characters as well as any of the additional side characters this game had to offer. A key part of how this is even possible is thanks to the interesting and unique way that 428 handles characters and story progression. Instead of one lead character, 428 follows all the aforementioned characters with all their individual stories, going together in parallel, but interacting all the time. The easiest way to explain this is a rope. They're all technically separated stories, but they weave in together back and forth to make a giant cohesive story that flows all together. These stories affect each other, and we see that through the story, through the gameplay, adding a feeling of livelihood that isn't possible without the structure. This leads to frustrating moments of gameplay, which we'll get to later, but because of the structure we get really diverse, really compelling stories that mesh incredibly well. We get hilarious comedy, we get a deeply introspective story, we get down-to-earth moments. There's so much to 428. It perfectly captures the modern human experience, and I absolutely love it. A great example of this, a great example of 428's strengths meshing together is a scene with Tama's boss Yanagashita. Yanagashita is one of my favorite characters in the game. He's basically a wacky snake oil salesperson, and is usually played for laughs, but at 1340, he's the center of one of the most touching moments in the game for me. He's down on his luck, with his event completely flopping and no real way to pay for his debt. But even then, he's still optimistic throughout the end, comedy moving to serious extremely smoothly, in a way that adds so much relatability and human touch in the story, something that most works simply do not have. Adding to my adoration of 428 is that this game has a magical ability rarely found in visual novels to keep every moment engaging. While some fans might bemoan the idea of slice of life, I believe this is not because of the concept, but because visual novels generally execute slice of life poorly. Slice of life in visual novels is either repetitive or just flat out boring. This is not the case in 428. It's a game that kept me wanting to read more and more simply because I enjoyed the moment-to-moment experience so damn much. The writing in this game is phenomenal, and the fantastic translation by Kevin Fran and others on the localization team just means that the charm and character were conveyed in spectacular fashion. The game was written with so much character, with so much moments of excitement and intrigue to the point that it's very hard to put down. Engaging story, relatable cast, enjoyable experience, touching moments. What more do you want from a game? Well, you'd want a completely engaging, seamless experience overall. If I could rate 428 solely by the quality of writing and presentation, I would give it a 10 out of 10. But there are other elements to the experience that ultimately let 428 down for me. Well, down for me as in, it's great but not perfect. These are, frankly, the story progression, the gameplay mechanics can easily take you out of the story and can be downright frustrating. Some things are distinctively old school here. Like, choices can be arbitrarily obtuse to find. There's no manual save, so maneuvering the story can be annoying. There's an auto read but no manual skip, but given how many saves there are, this is surprisingly not a big deal, but can be infuriating if you're looking for a specific thing. And last but not least, the amount of endings. There are so many bad endings. This bad ending can be a blessing and a curse. It allows the storytelling I mentioned before, but it can cause your story progression screeching to the halt at no fault of your own, rather frustratingly at times. There are 87 different endings in 428, many of them being very abrupt bad ends, and you'll run into them solely because you've gone too far on one character's route. Most of these bad ends are rather trivial, so you'll just have to go back to the previous story or whatever and start another character arc. But this can get really frustrating, and even if some of these are good, this is generally a trade-off that has its clear benefits and its negatives, and it's really the only thing that's keeping this game perfect for me. That being said, finding a game with this much charm and character is so hard, and if any of this intrigues you, you definitely should give it a shot. 428 is a fantastic experience with a consistently engaging story, a human touch, a different yet timeless presentation, and a different take on the visual novel structure that, honestly, if you're not me, might be very easy to fall in love with. The gameplay story progression might take you out of the game, it might be more than just frustrating at times, but it's worth it. There's nothing quite like this game, and 428 is easily my favorite game of the year. This has been RockmanDash Reviews, signing out.